think that's somewhat.
Here we go. And I think we're live. Welcome back to the weekly roundup. There's like a delay between Zoom and what it actually shows on YouTube. But anyways, welcome back to the weekly roundup, you guys. Yes, we are. So it is not a badge of honor to say that you are well adjusted to your current society. The idea is, if you are good at playing the game and everyone else isn't, you need to look hard and say, maybe it's because the game sucks. This has been coming up for me a little bit, talking with yogapreneurs in the last couple of weeks, because I think I'm getting a lot of questions, especially on the free coaching calls, around, well, this studio does this, or they all used to do that, or it's common, or the other really common commentary. Put your hand up if you've ever said this, like, well, in our market here in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, in Canada, in the States, on the West Coast, on the East Coast, in the South, on the North, people are XYZ. Here we do it like this. And what's been interesting working internationally for the last decade, coaching, talking with people, is every time that's said, and then we go look at it more critically, what we encounter is 8 out of 10, not true. Like, it's not actually that different. It's not to say that there are no nuances in your market or behaviors and et cetera, but I think that it's easy as an entrepreneur, and summertime is a time where this gets thrown in your face, to look at your society, your market, look at what other people similar to you are doing, and then you assume that that is the norm and you adjust yourself to that, instead of looking at yourself and your own business and doing what's right for you. And that is, there's some depth in that contemplation point across a few different things. But to finalize the point from a business perspective, let's take pricing, for example. I know Carol has some commentary on that later. If you look at everyone else's pricing and sales and whatever else, and you're like, well, Alex is doing a sale like this for the summer, so I'm going to do that too. The detail you're missing is Alex might be broke. So why would you copy that, right? The question is always, why is something work for you? It's not a badge of honor to be well adjusted to your own society. There we go. I'm going to spin it to, yeah, you guys go.
Well, I think Josh, that's a good point. I mean, I think looking at other businesses always gives us a perspective from which to base the market on in our region, what have you. But when it comes to, like, a lot of times people don't realize that their own business, I like to think of it as a single ecosystem. And it's really not how much you make it. And a lot of times it's how much you save. That's one way of looking at business at times. And the way that they're set up, if every yoga studio provided the exact same product and had the exact same amount of fixed costs, then you could start looking at each other, right? But because these ecosystems are so unique and so different in their demographics and their fixed costs as far as their business goes, you may see a studio that's able to do a really cheap monthly membership, but they may be paying, $2,600 a month in rent, and another studio that is paying $10,000 a month in rent. And so now you're looking at, I don't know, you're going to need 900 paid visits or whatever to pay the $10,000 a month before you even start making any money. So the important thing to realize is that, to your point, the foundation of each business and the way that they're organized is definitely different. And from the outside looking in, if you just look at the outside and don't get to the basic numbers of the business, then you can't really do apples to apples comparison. It doesn't work. And a lot of people, the market reacts to that. You'll see the industry, people be working at one studio. They love the studio, think it's so wonderful. They don't really know the cost, fixed cost of that business. And they think, well, geez, I'm going to go do it better over here. So when they go do it better over here, they sign a lease that's another 30% more per month. they copy, if not like make things cheaper than where they came from, because they don't really understand the business. And then you just keep going like this in the telephone across the country, across the globe, and no one's actually looked at how to run a profitable business.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
have to pipe
systemic.
back in on this too. It's systemic. And the thing that I would add to this as well is it goes the other way. It's the idea, like, one of the principles of marketing is to be different early and often. But marketing is beyond just, the messaging you put out there, and actually like how you appear in the market is part of your marketing. So it goes in the other way. It's why when Orange Theory is one of the storylines, right? It's why when Orange Theory sort of hit some big markets, I remember so many studios commenting like, how is it possible that I've been charging $99 or $89 a month for 10 years and people are griping about me trying to up my prices, and these guys roll into the market and charge 160, 170, 180, and everyone's like, sure, we'll pay it. It's like, because they just said that's what we charge. Like, they came in fresh and presented what they do new. They didn't try to calibrate to the market. They built their own market around it. And around their product and everything, which changed the perspective of what the value is. So it goes on the positive side as well, that like, by looking at what everyone else is doing and being competitive there, to Alex's point, there's details you don't know. And also by looking at what everyone else is doing and then just doing the same, you put yourself in the red ocean category of being with all of them. Now you're in a fight. What if you put yourself in a category that's the blue ocean, where you're just different enough, even if the product's basically the same? Orange Theory does not have a different product. Like, it's just some fitness.
Yeah, I do think, I know we're spinning off, but I do think there's a really unique opportunity in the yoga industry to change the model moving forward. Josh, I've said something to you this before, but a lot of times, essentially, for those of you who are thinking about opening a studio or just open, like, there's a lot of people going out there, they're signing, they want the location, they want the Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, in and around their space, right? They want walkability, parking, etc. So they're going to pay, let's say, $7,000 a month on rent. If you're averaging $11 a visit, that's one of the issues in the industry that's a problem in general. I think that should be more like 16, 15 or 16 in order to handle those fixed costs. But if you're going to get to, now you have to chase memberships, right? So one thing we could do is, like, from the beginning, is decide, like, we need, let's say the rent is no higher than $4,500 and we need X amount of members to pay that at this number, so that we move in the direction of higher touch, lower volume, and we're not chasing income for the foreseeable future of running the business. You talked about this earlier, Josh, in our other meeting, about like where your bandwidth shuts down and you don't have that leadership energy to take your business. It's so important. Yeah. So I think that maybe an Orange Theory and et cetera, with multiple locations, these guys reverse engineer the numbers from the get-go. They realize a reasonable number of members to maintain their brand, their energy, their message throughout their community, and they can handle sort of this potentially lower volume situation, but handle all the fixed costs and pay everybody well. So I think that the model of, open a studio, pay the rent, and then chase members is really old, right? It's getting old, because as coaches, we know this. We help you guys all the time, but it's the same problem. I don't care if it's Australia, London, California, Iowa, and I think there's room to shake it up.
I would just add to this, and then I know Terry's got some to add to this too, I'm sure, but like, we've often described that the difficulty in the yoga world, and this is not to say that if you fall into what I'm about to describe, that you're screwed and you can't make tons of money and have a very successful business. You absolutely can. We've proven it over and over and over again. But the difficulty is the yoga world accidentally calibrated to be not a box gym where you can have huge square footage and a low price and have thousands of members, but also not a boutique fitness place like Reformer Pilates, where every student represents 230 square feet. Therefore, you can charge $250 a month, $300 a month in a city because that's what has to happen. We're somewhere in this gray zone in the middle where it's like, so then there's a balance point where, yes, Alex is right. Like you can just be perpetually chasing more memberships. And at some point that equation might not work. So that, from that perspective, and what you're saying, Alex, too, I would really employ people, and it's part of what we do with coaching and what our coaching programs are based around. Side note, we have a whole program for if you're opening a yoga studio that helps you map out all of the numbers on this level, because what Alex is describing on this planning, these are not the numbers that you put in your business plan that you take to the bank for an SBA loan or a Canada Small Business Loan. That what you have to show the bank to get money is a different type of business planning. We're talking about the actual fucking, I'm going to run the business planning. Those should be the same thing, but they just absolutely are not. But that aside, that's why we have a bunch of calculators and different calculations. If you didn't see Alex's recent webinar on like, how much can you afford to pay your teaching staff and like how to like actually calculate that out. We do have all that stuff. So if you're starting a studio, those resources are there. But the point would be, your business is not you, and your business is a calculation. You can plan on your business being a macro calculation, and if you stick to that, it will work. In the yoga world, usually when we first start, and I did this as well with the first studio I managed, you just consider yourself the business, and we act based on our emotional response to the situation and how we feel about it and what we think is correct from a yoga-centric standpoint only. And then you have to then later on realize that that will hinder your growth and your vehicle of change and distribution. So paradigm shift mentally. You are not your business. We talk about that a lot. Your business is an equation. If you haven't seen it, we have what's called the Healthy Studio infographic. It's a very high level, simplistic way to describe what we're talking about, that like, that's the business as an equation. And if you can stick to it, then it will work. But it's being smart enough to actually look at it that way and make that calculation and do that. It's a good segue to Terry, who knows going to talk some KPIs here too.
My favorite subject, KPIs. Who would have known that my favorite topic would be KPIs? So I like what you said, Josh, about your business as an equation, and Alex talking about the unique ecosystem, because that's part of like the foundational stuff, right? Is understanding that and not chasing memberships, but understanding the numbers in your business and how they relate and where you need to be spending your energies. Right. And a lot of times it might be that you're chasing members simply because you're a cylinder and not a funnel. Right. When we talk about a sales funnel, it's like you pour in, you think of a funnel, it's this shape. Right. So you pour in a lot at the top and a little drops out. And what we see when you can see in your KPIs, and are you doing your KPIs, is that sometimes that funnel is not a funnel, it's a cylinder, meaning as much comes in, as much goes out. So while you're maybe thinking about, oh, I need to get more people in, I need to get more people in, and I've done this with several clients, is that no, you're getting a lot of people in, you're just not retaining them. So the problem is not that you need more people coming in, the problem is we need to create that cylinder down to a funnel. And the way you do that is by first and foremost understanding where you're at right now. And that is, again, going back to, foundational stuff, which is, pricing. Carol's got some great, she's going to talk a little bit here in a sec about pricing, and then also knowing your KPIs. And we're also partly why I've been working with a lot of KPIs this week. It's the first of the month, so I always do a lot of KPIs at the first of the month, but also because, Josh mentioned we now have a coaching program specifically for studios that haven't been open. But also we've created what we call an all access membership. And part of that is we really dive deep into the foundational stuff. Even those of you who have been open for years and years, going back and looking at all that foundational stuff. And certainly foundational stuff in your business is, where are you at right now? Where were you historically? And then where do we want to be? Finding out where do you want to spend your time and energy? Because you're maybe spending all your time and energy and money on lead generation. Well, that's not, we need to focus on keeping those people in. In fact, one client, if they didn't change anything in their marketing and just work to tighten up their sales process, we've calculated they could immediately add like 25 to 30% more revenue to the bottom line like that without changing anything else other than that. One thing worked out with another client is they're from drop-in, looking at their drop-ins. They had a shit ton of drop-ins. So we honed in and focused in, okay, why aren't these people buying their first month of membership, right? So we worked with the team, we got everybody on board. And just in that first month when they focused on it, they went from getting about 1 to 2% of people on a drop-in to convert to membership to 34%. Think about that. 34% more drop-ins converted to membership, converted to their intro offer, their direct to membership, right? So right there, they're getting a lot more revenue. Now, even if all of them don't stay on, which we know they're not, right? Because people do cancel. But even then, they took that single drop-in that before was just a drop-in. And now that person now is bringing in more revenue, even if they just stay for 2 or 3 months, right? So wouldn't have known that if we hadn't done what? Looked at KPIs. They're thinking, oh, we need more leads. We need more leads. No, they don't need more leads. They need more training. They need more conversions. They need more of that. So that's what I love looking at KPIs. And then the other thing is when you're looking at your KPIs, I like to say, what's the story they tell, right? So everybody's like, oh my gosh, things are slowing down. Well, are they? You might think they're slowing down because historically, oh yeah, it slows down in the summer. But in looking at the KPIs, you're looking at total visits, unique visits, and all that stuff. It's like, no, it's not slowing down. In fact, I had some clients who were like, wow, we had more people in May than we did in April. So is that a mindset thing? Kind of like what you talked about at the beginning, Josh, is not a badge of honor to say, oh, it's a summer slowdown, everybody slows down. Well, no, not necessarily. And also looking at, okay, we did this much. Look at where you were May last year versus where you May this year. Oh my gosh, you have 800 more paid visits, right? So that's why I get so excited about KPIs and the stories they tell. Alex.
Yeah, and I think the paradigm shift, of course, is just like the difference between how you feel or you perceive your business to be and knowing the actual numbers and the data. And that's, I think, before someone opens a studio, they may have had a really wonderful experience practicing at a studio for X amount of years. Maybe they become a teacher or they've been teaching for a period of time. And they have a perception, they have a feeling, a relationship to maybe their practice, their teaching, and the space in which they work. And then they go to open, and Josh was pointing out distinctly, like when you build a business plan to go to the bank to get an SBA loan or what have you, that is sort of high level, optimistic view. But a group like the YC and us as coaches can really help you as a new studio owner, like recognize the discernment, like discern the numbers. In other words, before you go sign a lease, I think it's the best time to get a hold of us, right? You got 6 potential leases out there. Let us look at those. Let us look at the numbers, because we know the reality of what it's like to live under that lease, or what that's going to mean for your space, your demographic, et cetera. So I do think the paradigm shift, really recognizing the difference between feeling and knowing, and the KPIs, running those monthly, quarterly, that'll give you the option to know the difference. Now, the next level, of course, is now you got to take action, right? And that's really hard to do for some people. And if you're one of those people that has a hard time taking action based on the data, okay, that's fine. Doesn't mean you can't be a serial, wonderful entrepreneur. You just need to ask for help, right? You need either a coach, accountant, you need forecasting, budgeting, you need to have like all these things in place, whether it's your bookkeeper, your accountant, et cetera, because have them help you make good decisions moving forward. It's critical. Somebody has to do all these roles in small business. It doesn't always have to be you. Some owners love this stuff and they teach a couple classes a week or don't teach at all. It doesn't really matter. But regardless, these roles need to be filled. There's responsibilities need to be done, and action needs to be taken. Josh?
Yeah, to double down on what you were saying, Alex, this is the idea of like what you feel in the business versus what your numbers say. I think it's important as an entrepreneur to trust your gut and to be aware of your feelings, but you need to also be able to look critically. Critical thinking is your superpower, your yoga superpower when it comes to, running a business. And that really is a yoga practice. If you're in the middle of a posture and the instructions are to do X, Y, Z, but you have to feel in your body and critically adjust for your specific alignment and body and ailment and et cetera, et cetera. This is just on the more macro scale. But to your point, it's the idea of prove it. So the other places that this shows up as a little bit of a parallel, right, is every studio on the planet that we talk to says, we say, what's unique about your business? And they say a few things, but they all say, we've got a great community, really awesome community. And they all say, we got the best teachers. Those two things come out of 9 out of 10 studio owners' mouths. So one, how can everyone have the best teachers and how can everyone have the greatest community? Doesn't even make sense. So it's not that those are incorrect statements, but this sort of feel versus metrics, the immediate follow-up would be, if you have the best product and the best teachers, prove it. What metric do you have that tells me you have the best teachers? Do you have the best retention rate? Are you double industry average? Do you have the best referral rate? Are people on their own accord writing reviews? Do you have a net promoter score program in place where you're constantly asking students about it? Are your teachers self-reporting that they're happy with, like, what's the metric you're using to say we have the best teachers? So that's not to cast any shade, but it's just a really simple example of what we're talking about, where you can say or feel something. Can you prove it? And when those things come together, that's your yoga brain, business brain meshing, right? When those two things mesh, you've got gold. Absolutely. So I think when you're looking at your business, it's that critical thinking, taking the feels, taking the yoga brain, but also taking the business brain and finding like, where's the intersection between those two things? And really great yogapreneurs are able to do that. Carol, before you froze in like just the most fabulous position ever for like a minute, you did have your hand up too.
Oh, no.
So I'm spinning it over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a little bit of that. But yeah, I wanted to go off of what Terry was talking about. When you're looking at your KPIs and you're thinking about it critically, the next step, because sometimes what's actually like needs a little help is your pricing. If everyone's buying a drop-in, maybe your intro is not priced correctly, or it just doesn't make sense for people to come in and, want to buy it. So, the way this applies is I have been working with some all access clients, and after we look at their KPIs, the next big domino is the pricing. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see is just too many. I think this is really obvious, but it may not be to everybody, but too many options. And when you really break it down into like a price per class, and you notice that maybe you have 10 options and 5 are within 50 cents of each other, like when you break it down by class, it just doesn't make sense. And so that's what can help you. And just by changing your pricing, you already had clients see such a onto their intro if the contrast between their intro and their drop-in rate is priced correctly. So you can start to look at the KPIs over time and like, okay, let's look back and see what this pricing change has done for us. And that's why it's really important to be on top of those, right? Alex, want to add?
Yeah, no, in addition to, this is a good example of like that look and way it makes you feel, and also the actual data, right? So you're talking about specifically the relationship of certain pricing options to one another. That's the data, right? That's the numbers. The other thing that we see is with too many options, but is also when things are too complicated. So the way it feels to your existing clientele and your potential clientele. So if they find you on the web or they find you on the, on your phone or whatever, it's really important to, like, as an owner, to stop work yourself through the user experience of how they're looking at your pricing. Because a lot of times I'll see owners, they really think it through. They think through every little aspect of their business, but yet they make it so complicated that they don't recognize that really they put up a barrier of entry or multiple barriers of entry. So I think of this like, well, I don't know if this is a great analogy, but like if you have a conversation with somebody and he or she really makes you angry and you want to react, it's a good opportunity not to react and just write it all down, write it all down, sleep with it, and then take the key points and present it to the person. Same thing with sometimes with pricing, like an owner will be like, I do this and I do this and I do this for cousins, I do this for my uncles and aunts and whatever. I have all these different pricing things and I really thought it through, but yet it blocks a lot. So I do see not only the numbers being wrong sometimes in the pricing options, but too convoluted and confusing. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would add to this conversation and say Carol's right. Like if the differentiation between them isn't significant, then you lose clarity. And if there's too many options, to Alex, to your point, then again, it's like you're asking me, the person purchasing, to consider too many things. I'm burning too many mental calories to make the decision. And especially right now, like people have decision fatigue more than ever. You're actually doing a disservice to your clients. And what we see in the data is if you create situations where your clients have higher levels of fatigue, total sales will suffer as a result of that. So you need the right amount of options by having an option for the standard occurrence clients that you have. And that's it. You don't need any more than that. That doesn't mean that there's never any behind the scenes stuff that you ever do or specials or whatever, but like it's a less is more situation. And there should be differentiation between them enough. Carol alluded to your single class versus your intro. It should be the intro from a price point standpoint should basically sell itself. Like it should just be a no-brainer when someone's coming in from the contextual perspective that it's a new person coming in who we're talking about who's making that purchasing decision. From that contextual perspective, what your intro needs to be related to your drop-in, like the obvious choice. And the other way to word that would be, if I came into your studio having bought nothing and you presented me drop-in versus intro, not that that's how we would present it, but suppose that happens, and I take drop-in and then I go home. When I get home, I should be like, that was stupid. I should have taken the intro. Like I should feel the antithesis of buyer's remorse. Like I should feel FOMO on like, I missed out. I should have taken that offer because it was like so obviously the right offer. And that's the relationship between those two things. Yeah. Go ahead, Terry.
Unmute. Yes, what was I going to say? Oh, I had a thought and it just died of loneliness. No. So again, sort of on this, the pricing thing, to what Carol mentioned too, is I'm going to throw this out at you. I don't know if you're familiar with the paradox of choice, right? Because having too many options, if you present someone with too many options, the thing of paradox of choice is if you have too many options, becomes overwhelming, and so the option is not to make a decision. That's typical human behavior. It's like too many choices. I can't decide. I'm not going to do anything. So A, we don't want that to happen. And then B, the other thing is we don't want the price to be the primary conversation for new people. Now, granted, we don't have a lot of walk-ins to studios anymore. So you do need to have your prices listed on your website for sure. And again, even if you have a couple of more, as Josh says, back pocket ones, what are the primary ones you want to sell on the website, right? So make sure that those are not too many there. But additionally, at the studio, do you still have your prices listed when people walk in? If you do, take them down. Do away with it. Because then what happens, people come in, they come up the front desk, they're looking right up at your price list or at the price list here, and they're already trying to figure out, well, which one am I going to do? Not a good thing. Take it down. One of the best pieces of advice I got was to take your pricing down. And I was really hesitant at first. I was like, what? I got to have my price. No, it made it so much easier, because then when that person did walk in, it was just like what most people do. Oh, sure, sign me up for that. Or when we were talking to someone at the front desk, because I was not direct to membership, when we were talking to people at the front desk to get them to take that next step, which was the membership, then the conversation became about, frequency of practice. What do you want out of your yoga practice? It did. Well, then we recommend 2 times a week, therefore a membership. Right. So it made that conversation much easier, instead of both looking at a price list going, well, I don't know about this versus this versus this. It's like you're guiding them to what you want that ultimate goal membership to be. So again, that's all about, like to Carol's point, when we work on pricing, it's not just about the price that you come up with for your service. It's like, how do you present it? How do you sell it? And pricing is more than just how much the price you pay, right? It's about all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes to get people to make that price. And I like to say this anytime we talk about pricing, I'm going to tell you right now, raise your drop-in. Raise your drop-in. I cannot believe how much resistance I get with people when I say raise your drop-in, but I can't. I'm like, it's a drop-in. And I had one client who just resisted, and she finally did. And I asked her how, she says, nobody said boo. And if someone complains about a drop-in, price of a drop-in, well then, buy a 10-pack or something like that. If they're from out of town, so be it. But a drop-in is a drop-in. So you want to get a little bit bump in revenue this summer? You want to do a promotion this summer? Raise your drop-in.
Yeah, raise my drop-in promotion.
Raise your drop-in price for people that are
Just
traveling. Just do
to
it.
add into, yeah, Terry and I have been going to a lot of studios this year so far, and this has been a conversation. And in a couple of the markets, honestly, I have to say, I'm even a little surprised. Like, we push that drop-in way up, like as high as it's ever been in the industry. People don't know. No one says anything. And what's interesting is that in a couple cases, they sell almost the same amount of drop-ins. Like, it has no negative impact when we look at the KPIs in the business at all. Yet it creates a better pricing strategy to funnel people towards the action that really, it's not just about more money from the client. It's also about how do you support them to have a habitual yoga practice so they actually succeed at achieving their goals and solving their issues that they're coming to you for. So yeah, I would agree with that. This actually, I was going to comment that pricing, and when we look at it, there's the KPIs of what's happening and what people are buying, and then you can adjust that. There's the retention rate and the sales rates and how that can be adjusted, and pricing's a function of that. Pricing also communicates to people, to Terry's funnel analogy, like, this is what we think you should do if you want to practice in this way. That's what your pricing tells them, is actually part of your communication. But it's also going way back to Alex's points earlier too, like, pricing is an interesting way for you to differentiate yourself in your market. Not by necessarily just the dollars that you charge, but the actual structure of it altogether. If everyone in your market has a $20 drop-in and a 4-time-a-month pass and an unlimited and a 10-pack, like, what if you just had a weekly membership? Now, I'm not saying that that's the best fit for you, but like, then people are going to look at you from the lens of your pricing and be like, what's going on there? Like, that's not the same thing as everyone else. There must be something different going on, right? So it does tie in the bigger picture to these other things too. And our whole conversation today, I think this ties it together a little bit.
Yeah. And if you really want to dive into things like KPIs and pricing and planning, we didn't get to, we were going to talk about Q4 planning, but there's still some spots with the summit, right? And you want to come and spend an amazing week in Mexico with us, hang out, have a ton of fun, and get a ton of shit done, then come to the summit. I kid you not, it's going to be the best investment you can make for yourself, for your business. So yeah, sign up. We want to see you there for sure.
Yep. Few spots left. This will be the last year that it's going to be this version. The retreat version will be just publicly available. We'll be changing to an invite only model moving forward. So it's a good year to come and get in there, so you get first dibs on the future years too.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now. Anything else to add, Carol, Alex?
I'm good.
One thing, if we're going back to the drop-ins. Like if I'm traveling, right, and I want to do a yoga class, I'm going to pay whatever they say. I'm not going to complain about a drop-in, right? So that's their thing. Oh, we get a lot of visitors. Fine. They'll pay for it.
Yeah.
They'll pay for it.
Or I'll complain, but I'll do it anyways.
Let's do it anyway.
You're like, oh. But then, you know, if you really get a lot of travelers, you can have a traveler's pass for them or whatever
Yes,
too.
you can have a traveler's pass for sure.
The only time I'm ever actually annoyed is when I'm somewhere for like 3 or 4 days. I'm going to practice 3 or 4 times. And all I can do is a drop-in. I'm like not eligible for the intro. They don't have a traveler's pass. They only sell a 10-pack for like $300 or something crazy and a really expensive drop-in. That's the only time I'm ever frustrated because I'm like, I would just buy the other thing if you had the other thing. But I still practice 3 or 4 times and just pay the drop-in every time. And
Or
that's it.
you could, like, that's one thing I'm like, why restrict your intro offer? If you have a new person come in, doesn't matter if they're a traveler, right? Josh could be in town for his, you know, a family member's wedding or something like that. And he does your intro offer and he tells all his friends, oh my gosh, there was this amazing yoga studio I went to. Even though I'm not local, they let me do their intro. You should go check it out. I had that exact thing happen to me at my studio. Because I didn't care. It's like, do yoga.
Yeah.
Do yoga. Then
Yeah.
take a few classes, you know, and spread. I would just tell people, tell your friends. And this one guy did. I ended up getting 2 members from him, all because I let them do the intro.
Exactly. And I think this goes back to Carol's point of simplicity and pricing. So if you are in a market that does have a lot of travelers, it might make sense for you to have a traveler's pass for that purpose rather than let them do the intro. On the other hand, it might equally make sense for you to just simplify for your whole team. Like if someone's new coming in the studio, just fucking sell them the intro. Like the whole like show me your local ID and stuff like that we see in studio owners, just don't worry about it. Sell them the intro, get people doing yoga, keep your classes full, you know. So that's to be hashed out per individual studio and what you're optimizing for. But that goes back to our whole point today of like, zoom out, bigger picture on the business. It's an equation, look at it critically, come up with the strategy that makes sense for you. And then you win. That's it. All right. Have a great weekend. That's it for now.
See you, everyone.
Questions, comments, thoughts, post them down below. We do check. And go do some yoga.
Or do some yoga.